Kia ora koutou. What I've wanted to do here is, I suppose, go back a little bit, and I've selected this John Kinder sketch, and like with all good arts, drawings, sketches and paintings, the focus of the picture is generally centred, and so when we look at that picture there, it's centred on the elms. But that's not what I want to actually talk about. Talk about what's on the right-hand side. And you'll notice this greenstone insert. It's not part of the original sketch. It's been inserted, but there is a story associated. So what I want to talk about is the Te Papa Peninsula, which we know today as the Mission Cemetery. Originally it was the Otamataha Pā. The Otamataha Pā was situated at the top or the tip of the Papa Peninsula, previously an important pā which had existed and had been destroyed with a great loss of life during a Ngāti Maru raid in 1828. Consequently, the site was considered tapu and was no longer occupied. The willingness of the Taonga Maori to see the missionaries settle at Otamataha may have been due to part to a belief that the missionaries would help to protect the site. It is also likely that they hoped that the missionaries' presence would attract trade and deter attacks from their enemies. From the missionaries' point of view, Te Papa was ideally located on good flat land between the two most populous pās, which were at that time Otu Moitai and Maunga Tapu. So it was centred in the middle of those two pā. I want to now just go on, and this is more in regards to the mere that's there. And it's an encounter that happened in 1828, and it was Captain Mair who supplies the following reference. So I quote, "Te Hāmai Waho was killed at Ohiwa in 1828, for there it was that a fierce battle between Ngāti Awa and Whakatohea took place at the ancient Pā Unekawa, where this chief fell. This was the year my father, as master of the mission schooner, the Herald, together with Reverends and Messrs. David, Hamlin and Williams, sailed to the Bay of Plenty, the first English vessel to communicate with the natives since Captain Cook, says the missionary record. Calling in at Tauranga, they found a chief called Kororo of the Ngai Terangi tribe, living with his people in a densely populated pā at the peninsula of Te Papa. That very night, Kororo's wife bore him a son, who is still living and named Hohepa Hukutaia, or Te Mea. Now, Gilbert Mair's father, Mair, gave his name to this child that was born. So sometimes he was referred to as Te Mea. My father gave the woman some blankets, American twill shirts, and in return was presented with a greenstone mere called Raukaraka, now in the Auckland Museum. 3 days after they sailed towards Opotiki, Te Papa was taken by Te Rohu, the son of Te Rangi Aniani of the Ngāti Tamatera, a tribe from the Thames district. Kororo and most of his people were slain. His wife plunged into the harbour with her newborn son on her back, but was pierced through by a musket ball, yet she managed to reach the opposite shore near Wharero, where she died. So I suppose for this particular taonga here, it was an exchange. It was a first encounter with people the native people who were living on this point. Sadly, those people were wiped out in that year. The second slide shows Tamihana and a letter written by Tamihana to Brown. But firstly, the question is, who was Wiremu Tarapipipi Tamihana? So I just want to go briefly through some of the history about who that chap there is. Now, he's pictured standing in front of the Elms library, I understand. One of the spade-back chairs in the corner. And he's holding what they call a staff or taiaha. So I'm just going to briefly go through this information about Wiremu. Wiremu Tamihana, born in 1865. Wiremu Tamihana Tarapipi Te Waharoa was born around 1805 and was of Ngāti Hoa from the Tainui Confederation. As a young man, he took part in several war expeditions. Through the influence of A.N. Brown, the Church Missionary Society missionary at Matamata, he quickly learnt to read and write in Maori. So when we have a look at that, what I do know about that is that when they were learning to read and write in Maori, Tamihana, as a child, they found it difficult to translate Brown's Maori because Brown was fluent in the reo Maori, but he had learnt his reo in the northern districts. And so when he came down into Matamata, the Maori living there found it very hard in some of the words of what was being said. However, they got there. After the death of his father his father was Te Waharo, in 1838, he became an influential chief of his tribe and later resisted pressure to continue fighting with neighbouring tribes. He practiced Christian beliefs within a traditional Maori framework. In 1834, he began building a new village at Te Tāpiri. The rules of the settlement followed the Ten Commandments, and by 1839, about 300 people were living there. The church at Te Tāpiri was said to be able to hold 1,000 people. A number of Waikato chiefs signed the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, but Tamihana and other chiefs did not. They resisted. In the early 1850s, Tamihana established another Christian settlement, Imperia. It included a post office, a schoolhouse, a flour mill, and it was administrated by a runanga or a tribal committee. Soon became busy and prosperous. John Gorse of the Waikato Civil Commissioner was particularly impressed with the Ngāti Hoa social and political organisation, which he attributed to Tamihana's influence. Like many other Maori, Tamihana became concerned at the growing European encroachment in land sales and the government's failure to support Maori social and political structures. He believed that a pan-tribal movement uniting all tribes would not only protect against European settlement, but also develop its own systems of laws and maintain peace amongst the tribes. Tamihana took a leading role in forming this, which we know today as the King Movement, and the election of the first king, Potatau Te Wherowhero. Accordingly, he became known as the Kingmaker. When Te Wherowhero was confirmed as king in May 1859, Tamihana placed a Bible over his head. This became the ritual which Tamihana's descendants still perform to this day. So our latest king, Tuheitia, went through the same ceremony, and it was a descendant of Tamihana who performed that. So that rite has stayed within that particular family. I just want to move over to the second part of that slide, which is the letter. It's quite a long letter. I think it maybe 6-7 pages, Joanne. But I'm not going to read all the way through that. However, I just want to read the introduction to the letter. E koro, tēnā korua ko mihi paraone. Ka nui taku hia kia kitea ki a koe. I mua ara i te takiwā o te tainga mai o hore kereama. Kia hau. Kia whau hia te rongo, I muri iho ka whakaaro au. In this letter, the opening of the letter, if I briefly just translate that, my elder. This is Tamihana writing a letter to Brown, my elder. So there is that level of respect already there. As Brown, that's mihi parawuni. That's what the Maori called Mrs. Brown. And so they held a great respect for her also. Greetings to you both. I have a great desire to see you. Before me lays a large obstacle, which this obstacle, and it's this obstacle that obstructs my access to Sir George Grey. So he's talking about there's something that is stopping him getting a letter to, at the time, Sir Governor Grey. Basically, the letter to Brown on the 26th of July 1865, now that's 1 year after the Battle of Gate Pa, 1865, addresses Tamihana's feelings of disappointment in regards to correspondence that he had written to Governor Grey's Parliament. He had written a petition to Parliament setting out his position by outlining an earlier letter sent to Governor Grey that reported a meeting between Tamihana and Brigadier General Carey, who we saw a picture of, the adventurous guy. Disputing the official report or record of surrender by the Waikato people. So we're talking about the Waikato Wars and the effect that it had here in Taonga, which followed from Gate Pa. So he disputes the surrender of Waikato. As Tamihana has indicated to Brown, he was of the attitude that a covenant of peace had been agreed. This is predominantly to do with the land wars in Waikato. However, also in the letter, Tamihana expresses his concern with Te Pōkehā. Te Pōkehā was Sir William Fox, or Major Fox. He was of Te Arawa descent and was involved with Mayor and also with the Te Arawa flying column. So Tamihana felt that Te Pōkehā had belittled his character and had been wrongly advised by Te Pōkehā. So by July 1865, there was still no government response to Tamihana's first letter or petition to Parliament. And that letter was dated on the 18th of July 1865, which asked for an independent inquiry. Tamihana also gives an update to Brown about a man which he calls Ahiwera. Now, Ahiwera was the Maori name for Reverend Ashwell, who was the presiding missionary based in that settlement, Te Tāpiri, which he had set up, the church that could hold 1,000 people. And he had said that Ashwell, or Ahiwera, had arrived at Tamahere. Now, it's at Tamahere is where the meeting took place between Carey, Tamihana, to sort out the surrender, or what Tamihana called a covenant of peace, bringing the end of the Waikato Wars. Then he mentions that Ashwell then is in the meeting for a period of time, and then he goes on to Auckland. Tamihana then ends the letter by mentioning his salutations to a man called Wakana, who was killed at Opotiki on the 2nd of March, 1865. Wakana is the Maori name for Reverend Faulkner. So that was the killing of Faulkner. And so I think just alone in the letter, I think we should be able to feel there was a closeness. This is like a son talking to his father. This is like, and updating him not only about his own problems that he's going through, but also informing him of what else is happening. So I think it's a very important one, and it's one of many letters that are in the Elms. This is a picture of a pou whenua. This pou whenua belonged to Tamihana and was gifted to Brown, I understand. And the pou whenua belongs to the same class of weapon as the tefa or the taiaha. It's a fighting staff, and used for stabbing, parry, and striking. This particular pou whenua was gifted to Brown from Tamihana and displays a series of notches that are recorded as representing family genealogy of Tamihana. So you can see the series of notches on the side here. In this sense, the pou whenua was used as a talking stick in a similar manner to what you'd see today with a walking stick or a tukutuku, how that is used today. And therefore, in this instance, it is an acknowledgement in regards to the relationship between Tamihana and Brown. So Tamihana is sharing his family with Brown by giving him this particular object. The Elms collection, as mentioned, catalogued 115 objects within the Elms collection, Maori collection. Very impressive collection. This particular waka huia represents a treasure box, and therefore it seems to be the appropriate object to start when we consider the theme of this presentation. And insight, and in that insight, I suppose it becomes an object that represents the Maori collection that sits within the Elms collection, because it's a treasure box. The waka huia were used to contain treasured personal ornaments, both for men and women, items such as heitiki, pendants, but more particular, the tail feathers of huia birds, hence its name, waka huia. Waka meaning a vessel, and huia the tail feather of a huia. This waka huia is finely carved all over with pakiti. It's a dog tooth pattern. That's the notches you see there. The highs are the parallel grooves. The main body of the design is underneath the actual waka huia, and highlights the chiefly genealogy of the owner. The purpose of decorating the bottom of a waka huia is so that one can appreciate it whilst it's hanging. So the correct way for this type of taonga was to hang it from the rafters of a house. And therefore, the bottoms of the waka huia were carved. The terminal ends of the base have these crouched figures, which symbolise the primal parents, rangi and papa, essentially. And so what we have here is we have the rangi and papa. The box in the middle becomes the world between the sky and the heaven, sky and earth. This is painted in kokowai, which is a red ochre type paint. That's the orange colour. And the black is done with mixing charcoal with the shark liver oil to get the black colour. This is a very interesting piece, and there were two interesting pieces when I was working with Joan that really caught my eye. This was one, so I selected that. A door pare, it kind of just looks like a piece of old driftwood when we look at it like that. But I suppose this piece of carving is the only remaining evidence of a door lintel or pare. It is unknown whether this piece was gifted to Brown, which is highly unlikely. I mean, you wouldn't turn up with a piece of stick like that and gift that. Or whether it was collected by Duff or handed into Duff, or an original artefact belonging to the site itself. It could have been found on site. It's one of those uncatalogued pieces. However, it does deserve some attention. In analysing the form, we were able to obtain that the carving was done using stone tools. So therefore that would sit at around about the 17th century, early 17th century. The timber is tōtara. Its form is characteristic of a period called Te Puna Waitanga, which is your classic Maori carving style or period. The surface design is remnant, showing areas of either taratara ākai or a notched pākura pattern. So the next stage was to do a sketch. So sketch this one up, and I suppose what the sketch does is it shows the position of that piece. So you can see the piece in the darker part, and then we've added in the centre figure, which is a full frontal figure. The figure on the side is a side figure, which is called a manaya, and I've just written on there where the front foot is. There's a missing piece there, another foot there. The style of surface pattern is taratara ākai, or as I mentioned, it could also be, what did I say? A pākura, a notched pākura pattern. Now these are two other pare of the same era. The top one is a Gisborne pare, and so it shows that same pattern again. The surface pattern is what I'm talking about. And in this bottom one here, the Bay of Plenty, again heavily decorated in that pattern. So it is likely that the piece that we've seen prior is actually from the Bay of Plenty. This is the second part, uncatalogued, that caught my eye. This is an amo. Here we have another example of stone carving. This carving is possibly from an earlier period, which is te tipunga, which is the proto-Māori phase. It's when Māori were experimenting with carving. So it's around about the period of 1650, that era, maybe earlier. I would classify this style belonging to hauraki, o Ngāti Tamatera. Now, with Tamihana, he had an affinity there to Ngāti hauraki as well. So based on the form, the head characteristics, the carving represents a female deity, which isn't out of the norm or character of hauraki carvings. And I'll just make a reference to the Patetunga lintel, which tells the story of the famous Maori ancestor Maui, who endeavoured to conquer death by deceiving Hine Nui Te Po. So it is very similar in style, shape and form. See in the sketching there, it has the large eyes, the large bulging eyes, the open mouth, the arm or the hand coming up into the mouth itself, the other hand coming down and coming onto the side and then flicking back up. This style of hand represents a thing called te kune. Te kune is representing a period in time where birth happens. So it's best, I suppose, illustrated with how a child is born. And hence this is a female figure. The puiawe, literally meaning poi, a ball, awe, is associated to a word called mana. Mana means influence, to have influence on something or over something. There are two main types of decorated poi. Those that were woven using a tāniko weave, and the other made from fine flax fibre netting called a tā. This is a tāniko weave. So on your, on the left, right-hand side of the presentation is the puiawe within the Elms collection. The comparison on the other side is a puiawe in Te Papa. And okay, just to make that difference there. Both styles are ornated with diamond-shaped figures termed papakirango. So you'll see the diamond shape here. The papakirango in Maori mythology is associated to warding away evil. or for cleansing something. These poi were predominantly used for ceremonial purposes only, rather than entertainment. As we see pois used today for entertainment, they were used more so for ceremonial purpose. This poi awe has a surface fabric made using a knotting or netting technique, uses a single cord of rolled flax which forms the base of the ball. This netting technique was likely to have been done using a large bone needle. The preferred bone being from an albatross. These poi were traditionally packed with ropor. A piece of cord encircles the poi vertically and horizontally with small strips of dog hide, which have been looped around the cord encircling the poi in decoration. So the materials to make up this poi are muka, or the flax, the fibre from the flax, the muka. The kia form the diamonds. Then the ropor is the stuffing, and also the yellowing in the pingao, and then the dog hair. So all of those elements joined to make that poi. So there is a very much a huge difference between your ordinary poi used for entertainment and the work that's gone into one of these. It's a very important treasure actually that the Elms holds there. There are very few that have survived. The kaitaka, or the cloak. So on the side, on the right-hand side there, we have the examples of two kaitaka. They are two, or the same? The kaitaka is a very early type of Maori cloak, which has been seen and collected by Captain Cook. So there are kaitaka cloaks in the Cook collection. These cloaks were also known as paipairoa, which indicates firstly their large size and secondly the technique used to create them. So they are of huge size, and on this we have a Robley painting here of Tomika wearing one, so you get the idea of how the cloak is worn. That painting was painted just after the Battle of Gay Pa. The classic kaitaka was woven using New Zealand flax, which is then beaten to soften the fibre. Many early examples are plain, and others show a limited use of tāniko or decorative weave. The tāniko is the coloured part down the bottom here, the decorative weave. The borders were much thinner in the older cloaks and incorporated the colours black and brown. These were by using natural dyes. Later examples often have full tāniko bands, so they're quite large, like in the painting here, we see them quite large. They seem to have got larger and larger. With the arrival of Europeans, the introduction of sheep, the Maori seemed to take a liking to the brightly coloured wools, and so this became another material that was incorporated into these types of cloaks. The kaitaka eventually became obsolete around about 1880 as other cloak styles known as korowai grew in popularity, and then they were replaced by the classic, which replaced the classic kaitaka, and today we see more strength in the feathered cloaks. Some of the most valuable items woven from harakeke were dress cloaks, such as the kaitaka. These were usually whānau heirlooms or family heirlooms. They were Taonga tuku iho, so they were objects that were passed down from generation to generation, which in most cases bestowed ancestral names. So cloaks of such a type usually had names given to them. I suppose where I'm going with this is where I started, and it's about the relationship that Māori had with Brown, and it's the gifts that went between Brown and Māori. And for a cloak of this sort of prestige to be handed over, for someone to an heirloom was like, I suppose, adopting a new member to one's family, or extending one's family. So kia ora koutou.